Hello, everyone. Welcome to another weekly wrap up. It is a Saturday night. I hope everybody's week has been well for them. It's been quite a busy week for me, which meant that I didn't get a huge amount of reading done. There's some stuff to show off here. I'm also going to be talking about a light novel that I read for this week. But a lot of my time, especially the last 2 days, has been spent watching Japanese films, actually, because the 4th, which was yesterday, was the very first day of the Japanese Film Festival, or JFF Plus, which this year, in order to hold the film festival, they have it as a free streaming service online, which is really cool. And there's a whole bunch of various territories that it covers, including all over Southeast Asia. Currently, I know that both Australia and the US have films scheduled for right now. So if you are in a country that is covered by the film festival in general, this is the second block. So there's Australia, New Zealand, the USA, India, Cambodia, South Korea, and Indonesia, I think, is the last one. Maybe there's another one I can't quite. Thailand, maybe? I don't remember. Doesn't matter. But really interesting group of films. Typically, when it is the normal film festival, I only have enough to go see one or two of the films, and I tend to prioritize anime films or adaptations of manga, things like that. I saw the Chihayafuru live action films via the JFF many years ago, well, a couple years ago. I've seen the Erased live action film that way. What else have I seen? I can't even remember. I want to say maybe Ride Your Wave. Maybe. Who knows? Doesn't really matter. But this year, because it's online, because it is free to watch all of the movies when they are scheduled in their 24-hour blocks, it's meant that I've been able to watch most, if not all, of the films that have been scheduled this year. Yesterday I watched Project Dreams Building Mazinger Z's hangar, which was really fun. They label it as a drama. I feel like it's a comedy. I laughed more than I was taken aback at it being a drama. It was good though. It was a wild time, but it was good. I also watched Gone the Little Fox, which is a stop motion short film. It's only a half hour long. Pretty solid. Kind of expected, a little bit like a maybe Fox and the Hound type of story. I'm not quite sure. You know where it's going, and it's not a happy ending. And the stop motion puppets, at least for Gone, the main character, this little fox, is weird. It looks weird. They look hand carved, and I don't know if the humanoid fox stop motion puppet looks that great. But that's fine. It was a solid little, half hour spent. I also watched Key to Life, or Key of Life, whatever the film is called, which was great. I really liked that one. That was another dramatic comedy. That one is about a woman who's trying to get married within the next month, and then two men who switch identities after one steals the other's identity after he gets amnesia after an accident. But little does this guy who's stolen the identity realize that the person who he's stolen his identity is actually a hitman. And so he gets embroiled in a whole bunch of stuff. It was a really fun time. And then today, as I said, I watched Gone the Little Fox, but I also watched Dance With Me, which is another comedy, but a musical comedy, which is about a young woman who like really hates performing in musicals and things like that. And she's trying to get a certain position in her workplace in order to like catch the eye of her boss, who's this very handsome young man, very likable. All the women are very charmed by him. Um, but she gets hypnotized kind of accidentally, and so now every time she hears music, she breaks into song and dance. And so she's now on a cross-country road trip to try and find this hypnotist, and break the hypnosis so her life can get back to normal. It was fun. It was funny. I do think that I don't know how Japan like values singers, insofar as like how what is deemed a good voice, quote unquote, because I don't necessarily think that comparing to like the two musicals coming out of other countries, the tone and the clarity and the way that these singers sound in this particular film is quite different to what I think people expect of especially like a Hollywood musical or an American musical, but even like British musicals. And it's a different, I think there's different values to singing in I don't know, that's me making assumptions, but I know there was some discussion about it at the time when Bakuman covered this, because the girl in that, Miho, is meant to be training as a voice actress and singer, and she's there's a part where she sings, and for whatever reason, and a whole bunch of people are like, oh, she sounds terrible. And for Western listeners or watchers, people were like, she sounded normal or fine. I don't know what was wrong with her voice. And then that caused a bit of discussion. But yeah, so I watched those. I will be watching more in this coming week or so, however long is left for this period of the festival. And I work today. I work tomorrow, so I don't know how much time I'll actually have to watch all of these films. But I try to get to what I'm interested, at least try to prioritize stuff. Yeah, so what I read 1, 2, 3, 4 manga. I also read a light novel, so I'm going to talk about that one, as it's a continuation from what I was reading last week, which was, I read the first volume of Tear Moon Empire, which is a story about a young princess who comes to a grisly end in her original timeline, but she gets a second chance. She goes Groundhog Day style several years before her death, and is given a chance to change things before her kingdom collapses, and before the people turn against her, and before she is not betrayed, but kind of hated by everyone around her, and is given the opportunity to change who she is and people's perspective on her. And it's quite good, in a similar tone to Baccarina. A little more serious than Baccarina, but it still has an idiot kind of main character. I do think that Mia has a pretty different personality, though, from Katarina. Not so much so in that, because with Baccarina, that's an isekai. It comes with its own set of challenges. That Mia was never like a person in a previous life aside from herself. She didn't come from our modern day world with all of this knowledge of technology, or all of the knowledge that this is a game premise and thus I know how to win all of the things. It's literally her having to redo her life and maybe pay attention this time as to a lot of the social and political issues that are happening around her. The second volume, it was good. It was good. So it follows our main character during the summer break, during her school, and she's quite like still trying to figure out the problems in relation to famine, which was a big problem in the original timeline, and she's building relationships that way. And meanwhile, while she's doing this, she's also sending letters, very frequent letters, to her sweetheart, Prince Abel, in a neighboring kingdom. But at a certain point, the letters from him stop coming. So she thinks maybe they just got caught up, maybe something, there's a reason that they're late. But while she's out figuring things out, first of all, she stops a skirmish. She stops very high tension conflict in the middle of this forest zone between the kind of landowners or the dukes of the neighboring area, one duke in particular, and a native tribe who lives within this forest because he wants to cut all these, the forest down and to expand his land. She manages to, in her bumbling way, figure that out. So there's there's less racial tensions, and it avoids a genocide of a minority people, which is always good, always a positive thing. And then she also but then that follows with the Abel letter situation, and she hears through the grapevine that there's a revolution brewing in Abel's kingdom, which didn't happen in her timeline. And so we as readers are privy to, there's actually this larger conspiracy happening in the background, and perhaps the fall of Tear Moon Empire in the original timeline wasn't just because the royal family was just really shitty at their jobs. It was a more concerted effort from a group of people who are wanting to topple royal families in a multitude of kingdoms. So Mia grabs her friends. She brings, friends, quote unquote. She doesn't really like. She is friends with them, but she is very wary of them as well, because in the original timeline, they were responsible for her in capture and prison sentence and ultimate death. Prince Sion from Sunkland, yeah. Sunkland. Tiona, who is the daughter of an Outerlands count or an out count. Do they take her lady in waiting or whatever it is, her maid? I don't remember who. And they take the guy, what's his name? Sion's right-hand man / adoptive brother, kind of, best friend. I want to say Fleetwood. That is not the right word. He has a name. Keith Wood. Oh, I was close. So they take him, and I think Anne doesn't go. She wants to go, but she stays behind. I think then maybe they take. No, I think it's just the four of them, and they get separated, and a whole bunch of stuff happens. But they figure it out, and it was a good time. I have only just started volume 3. I do want to read that, but I was wanting to finish the first 2 volumes before the end of the month because that series was the catch-up title for J Novel Club subscription, and I had wanted to read it. I'd heard good things about it, and it was good. It was kind of what I expected. And if you like things like Balkarina, aka My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, or similar things in a similar vein, perhaps The Duke's Daughter, which I haven't read, but I assume they're somewhat similar. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, it was. If you like reading about kind of silly, stupid princesses falling in an upward direction of positive change, then you may enjoy it. Then I read manga, obviously. Not a huge amount, as I said, only 4 volumes, but 3 of them were debuts. The other one was a continuation. I think I'll get that one out of the way first because I read this one today. It was basically the most recent volume that my library had in, and it's also due to go back soon, so I wanted to be able to return it this coming week, and that is volume 26 of Slam Dunk. It was fine. It was good. Continuing the game that they're playing against. I don't know what school is this. Sano. They're fighting. They're playing Sano Technical College, or school or whatever. Yeah, this book covers the last part of the first half and all of the various things that go on amidst that. Notably, a new player for the Sano team has been introduced to go directly against Sakuragi, and it's sort of a battle of strength and size. And despite Sano, the school, being this kind of figurehead, they're usually the representatives for the area, I believe. They're our school, what is it, Shohoku, is doing very well there. I think the entirety of the first half they're in front, so they have more points. But with the end of this volume, Sano has finally overtaken them for the first time throughout the game, and that has caused great tension. But we have another 20 minutes to go, which in this manga form may mean another 3 volumes to go. And we are getting close to the end. This is only a 31 volume series, so there's only 5 more volumes after this. So I would expect that this is probably the last game in the series, which is fine. I kind of forgot. It's been a little while since I've read Slam Dunk, and I don't know whether they're in the final stages for the prefectural tournament, or if they're in a national setting or what. I don't remember. I don't remember. But they're doing very well. They're doing very well for themselves, considering they're a ragtag team of a bunch of guys who are a lot of hot air and some skill, but are certainly not perhaps the most usual of play. I don't know. I don't know that much about basketball, but Sakuragi is a pretty classic, dumb but good-hearted protagonist who's always willing to fight for what's best or whatever. And he's a hothead delinquent and who thinks he's tough shit, but is just trying to impress the girl that he likes. Thus, he joined the basketball team. And I don't remember, I know the characters. I recognize the characters. They're all very recognizable. Rukawa, I do remember his name. Mitsuo, I remember his name. I don't remember the other guy's name. The guy who's crushing on the manager. And I don't know the captain's actual name. He's just like gory or gorilla or whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's not too much of the series left. I'm enjoying it for what it is, but it's certainly not my favorite sports series. I can understand why people do love the series. I'm sure that it's probably a more fun basketball series for a lot of people, or a more realistic, fun basketball series for people to follow comparatively to some of the other stuff we've gotten in English. And that's not a knock on those other titles, but I would say that probably Takehiko Inoue is more highly regarded than the mangaka of Kurko's basketball, which I don't remember his name. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, it was fun. It was good. Slam dunk. There's not too much more to it than that. Next, the first actual manga that I read for this week was the first volume of Blue Period by Tsubasa Yamaguchi. This is a book about a kind of delinquent, but also pretty responsible high school kid who he doesn't really have much in his life that he's passionate about. He hangs out with friends. He looks like a delinquent, and he doesn't really take. He goofs off a lot in art class and things like that. But generally, he's a very studious kid. He studies a lot. He ensures that he has some of the best grades in the class, if not the year, because he is working towards university with the expectation of getting kind of free ride. He can't afford to not go to a public university because his family just can't afford it, and so he needs the best grades that he can get to get into the universities of his choice. But again, because he doesn't really have a huge amount of anything in his life that he's passionate about wanting to do, he's just doing all of this stuff and going this university route because it's expected of him rather than anything he's actually wanting to do. He doesn't have an end goal in sight, right? But one day, whilst he is in art class, he's given a project to create, draw, paint, whatever it is, his favorite view. And he decides to take it seriously, and he chooses the site of Shibuya early morning, where he feels that it's just completely painted in blue. It's a very beautiful, peaceful, tranquil period in the day, and something you only experience if you are in the area in the very early morning, which is something he has experienced with his friends, like whilst they're gone home after a night of drinking and a night of shenanigans. And through that, he's kind of inspired by the way that creating art makes him feel, and how expressing himself through art is something that he feels more comfortable in doing. And thus he discovers that he wants to be an artist, and which brings us a whole other level of challenges, namely the fact that he just doesn't really have any understanding of art and the art community, and his own personal expectations. But if nothing else, he is a hard worker, and he absolutely dedicates himself to improving because he does want to be better, and he does want to create art that he's proud of. And you see his growth over the course of even the single volume, of how much time and energy he puts into even the basics of art, namely still life stuff in this book, and how much he values that in it as a learning tool, because he realizes that he's starting so far behind other people who are kind of aiming for art schools in the same period that he would be. He doesn't have a childhood or a lifetime of being an artist and practicing art and honing skills, because it just hasn't really happened for him up until this point. It was beautiful. I really, really loved this. Personally, I was obviously there's a whole bunch of different arts, and the term arts is like a huge big umbrella, and I would call myself an artistic person, but the way that I express myself is through the written word. It's through communication, in with language, right, rather than drawing or sculpting or even music, stuff like that. I'm not a terrible artist, but I also haven't put in the hard work, the practice, the dedication that people who are artists, people who do like really value art and who want to be artists, illustrators, graphic designers, full stop, or whatever else it is. I never did art in school aside from the prerequisite stuff. It just wasn't really an option I saw for myself, but comparatively, my sister did do art in a lot of her high school. She's not in an arts degree anymore. She's in the, and it's kind of funny because I did an arts degree. Like, I just finished my arts degree in university, which was again for writing, whereas a lot of her high school stuff was arts focused, but now she's in a science degree. So it's really interesting how that works out. But I mean, artists are incredible, and I really, really, really appreciate in this book how it dismantles this illusion of talent, right? Because, and I talked about this in my whole video, in that our main character, he tells one of the girls in the art class that, or in art club, I should say, that she's so talented. Like, her artwork is amazing. She's so talented. And she said, like, I realize you're trying to compliment me, but I don't appreciate you just saying I'm talented and disregarding all of the hard work and all of the time and effort that I've put into my art to build these skills. And that was really, like, really lovely to see, because, and it's something that's been brought up in other series as well, of this like talent versus hard work idea. But I mean, it's true. It is absolutely true in that people can be innately talented at stuff, but if you don't put in the work, if you don't put in the practice when you are talented, quote unquote, then you ultimately will be taken over by people who have put in that hard work. And oftentimes people who are naturally gifted at something do kind of sit back on their laurels and kind of assume, like, well, there's nothing for me to learn. There's no way I can improve. I'm already really amazing at this, so why should I try to be better at it? And therefore, as I said, they kind of lose out to these people who realize that they want to be better, and so they have to put in the work to be better, to improve, to get, more and more skills to create the things that they want to. It's the same, whether we're talking about painting, sculpting, architecture, writing, music, any of these things, mathematics, like all skills are like this, right? So it's really, I love this a lot. This has won a bunch of awards, or it's been nominated for a bunch of awards in Japan. It's had a very positive buzz for quite a while, since it started, really, which is a couple years now at this point. And so it was one that I was anticipating to be good. And yeah, it certainly didn't disappoint me. So if it sounds like your thing, check out Blue Period. It's pretty good. I liked it a lot. Yeah, it's pretty good. Next is another, and again, kind of to do with talents versus hard work, and the arts, but in a different medium, and that is Blue Giant by, what is his name? Shinichi Ishizuka. So this is an omnibus with the first 2 volumes in it. I think the original Blue Giant, because it has multiple sequels at this point, is 8 or 10 volumes long. So there'll be 4 or 5 omnibus releases from Seven Seas. And then there's Blue Giant Supreme, which was a, I think, 11 volume sequel. And then there is another sequel, which I don't remember the name of. And that's just started. That's currently ongoing. But this is the story of a high school boy called Dai, who in middle school was absolutely just discovers jazz music through a friend, through one of his classmates who really loves jazz music. And they go to a club, a jazz club, together, sort of at the end of junior high. And prior to this, Dai didn't really get jazz, didn't really understand it. But when he saw a live performance, that's when it captured his attention, and he really fell in love with it. And he made the decision that he wanted to be a jazz musician. He wanted to become the greatest jazz musician that there ever was. And so he decides to become a saxophonist. He plays the tenor sax, and he dedicates himself to it. He practices it every single day. He plays on the shore of the river, so he's out of the house. He's hopefully not causing people any problems, but he realized he doesn't have any formal teaching. He doesn't know how to read music. He's just learning everything by listening to the greats, right? So he's listening to other very famous jazz musicians, saxophonists, and learning by ear all of these techniques. And subsequently, because of that, he has this passion, he has this sound that's very unique and that really captures people's attention, but it is very obviously amateur. People can tell, he can't even make a noise the proper way. He doesn't have the proper form when playing the saxophone, and again he can't read music, and he hasn't listened to any of the smooth jazz, so he doesn't really have any experience with quieter pieces, which causes a lot of issues over the course of his journey. But he doesn't allow himself to be put down by that, and he takes it all in stride and realizes well, I can just keep getting better, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to fix things and to grow and to change. And so it's not only about him and his love for saxophone and jazz, but also him kind of spreading his love of jazz to other people and trying to make the people important in his life understand why he loves it so much, including his kind of girlfriend, including his family, his dad and his brother. And he has a very supportive support system. And it's quite nice to see, although there's been conflict. There's been conflict, definitely. But overall, it's been quite a positive upward journey. It was good. It was good. This is another award-winning manga in Japan. It was one that sounded pretty interesting. If you like music manga, then give it a shot, maybe. If you like the saxophone, give it a shot. I will say, and I said this in my whole video, that if you're not familiar with jazz, then it might be a little bit harder to mentally, not visualize, that's not the right word, but mentally place these jazz pieces into the manga if you're not a jazz fan, or if you have no exposure to jazz. Do yourself the favor. Like, jazz is pretty cool. There's a lot of great jazz out there, and there's a lot of very talented jazz musicians, both historically and contemporarily. But yeah, if you're wanting probably a more in-depth idea of how this manga sounds, then I would recommend you listen to maybe some of the artists that are mentioned in this book. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I definitely understand the argument that music, even for me, like music manga can be quite hit or miss, because ultimately you're never going to be able to hear these pieces, especially if they're not pieces that you're familiar with. And you will never truly get an idea of performance through through a medium with no audio component to it, right? And that's why a lot of music series work very well or gain a huge popularity after an anime adaptation, because obviously there's music. Music and vocals and things like that in those series. And it's like music anime or manga that have anime adaptations that are music based will still be popular, but I would say that most people would say, like, if you read it, maybe watch the show as well, because then you get an idea of the music. And it's everything from Your Lie in April, Beck, Norame Cantabile. I'm sure if this got an adaptation, that as well. Kids on the Slope. There's another one, Anonymous Noise, Given. Like, all of these series focus on music or have a very integral musical element to them. And music is like a very powerful art form. I think for a lot of people it is a universal language, even if you don't inherently understand the language that a song is sung in. The emotionality of it can be quite a universal thing. And so music is definitely something that brings a lot of people together. We know this, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if this got an anime adaptation, although I am kind of wondering how they do it. And interestingly as well, at the end of all of these volumes, like the proper breakdown of the volume, it has people reflecting on our main character in his youth during the period that is being covered in these series, in this event, in these chapters, but with the implication that it is many years in the future, in which Dai has become a professional jazz musician, perhaps the greatest in the world. We do not know, but we do there. So there's an implication that yes, he will achieve, if not his ultimate dream, then he has achieved part of his goal, which might spoil it for people, but it might encourage you to want to see how he got there as well. So perhaps a little bit divisive, and perhaps maybe not the most approachable of music genres for I don't know, like I can never tell who a general manga fan is, because I think of it in terms of like who typically buys manga. And when you're in the manga collecting community, like we're all adults typically with jobs, some younger than others, some older than others, but we're all typically like mid-20s and up, with few exception, and that's not a bad thing, but it typically there's a certain age demographic that is in the collectors community because they have the wherewithal to be able to spend money on manga. generally more income or disposable income perhaps to spend on manga. But then also the general manga reading population tends to skew younger. So my perception is that it tends to skew younger to teenagers and early 20s, but generally teenagers. And I don't know if teens are necessarily interested in this. I don't think they'd be uninterested in it necessarily, but I don't know if jazz, and it's like, this isn't for teens. I'm pretty sure this is a seinen, so it's, and it doesn't really matter if it's made for, like, it's a great manga regardless. But it also doesn't have, I mean, I think jazz is really cool, and I'm sure a lot of people do think that jazz is very cool, but it doesn't have the cool factor that something like Beck does, or the emotional like hook / romance aspect that Your Lie in April has, or Norame has, or arguably Kids on the Slope has. It's a different type of story, and it does remind me a lot of Beck, but because it's jazz versus rock music, again, the approachability just might be a little different versus that series, which is also very good. Read it. It's available in its entirety from Kodansha digitally on all of the digital platforms. Comixology, if you have a Comixology Unlimited account, you can read the entirety of Beck for free there. Or Kindle, if you have a Kindle Unlimited, you can read all of it for free. That's 34 volumes worth of manga, and it's very good. It's very good. But I didn't read that this week. I read that last year sometime. But final book that I did read this week, and that is My Broken Mariko, which is by Waka Hirako. This is a josei drama, I believe. I'm pretty sure this is a josei drama. Well, I know it's a drama. I'm pretty sure it's a josei. And this is about a young woman who's in her late 20s who has her best friend recently commit suicide, the titular Mariko, who has killed herself after a lifetime of abuse from family and partners as well, and who in her life was constantly stuck in a very toxic cycle that she was never able to escape from, that she kind of continued to return to because that's how abuse works and how toxic cycles work, and who our main character was never able to truly save. They were each other's really only best friends. They're definitely their support system. And now, as her surviving friend, she really carries a lot of guilt as to why she wasn't able to save her friend, why she wasn't able to be there for her, and reflecting on their lifetimes together. They met in junior high, I think, or middle school, and grew up throughout middle school and high school together. And she was the only person to really do anything about her father's physical and sexual abuse. She's the only person to really do anything about Mariko's boyfriend's abuses towards her. But shortly before Mariko commits suicide, that our main character, what is her name? Tomoyo. Tomoyo kind of asked her, or got very frustrated with her, like, why would you keep putting yourself into these situations? That doesn't make sense. And Mariko just being like, well, it's because I'm broken. It's because this is what I've known, and this is what I am, and which is a heartbreaking thing, but it is a very, I think, unfortunately, realistic portrayal of a lot of abuse victims and how they feel about themselves and how they feel about their worth in regards to how their lives have been changed and altered by toxic people in their lives. But so Mariko has died, and so Tomoyo decides to basically kidnap the ashes of her best friend and take her to a place that they were never able to go to in life, which is the Mari shore, like a beach. And so she goes cross country to this particular beach to basically say that she's gone with Mariko. And again, that reflection of like having the guilt of not having been able to do anything ultimately for a person that Tomoyo very much cared about, and feeling useless because of that, and questioning as well, like why was this the time that she didn't reach out to her? Why was this the time that she wasn't able to be her support system? Why was this the time that she didn't ask for help when every other time, she had, and they'd gotten through it together, or Tomoyo had been able to protect her to a certain extent. It's a heavy book if that whole explanation wasn't obvious as to the content and how like full on it is. But it was very good. It obviously may be very difficult for a lot of readers. It may be very triggering to personal situations, and so therefore it's not a series I can like blanket recommend to everyone. But if you don't mind reading dark themes or premises about abuse, especially, and abuse cycles, and survivor's guilt, and the guilt of letting down people who are important to you, and that whole cycle, again, another personal cycle of having to come to terms with like, no, it's not your fault when someone else commits suicide. It's not how much is your fault, and you can't take personal responsibilities for someone else's death in this situation. It's full on. Definitely will probably make a lot of people shed some tears. It's good, but certainly not for a little bit of late night light reading. I wouldn't end my day on this one. But it was wonderful, and I mean, it's a beautiful release from Yen Press. I'm really hoping that we see more stuff like this. I love drama josei, and I love josei that is outside the perhaps typical thought of it just being about romance and older women's relationships with men generally, rather than, because obviously this is a relationship between women and their life together, and their experiences together. Things like Descending Stories, which is very outside the scope of something like Princess Jellyfish. Like that's the great thing about manga, is obviously a demographic has a huge variety of genres within it. But I do think that josei, and to a similar extent shoujo, we know this isn't a controversial statement, but the diversity there in the titles that we see licensed and released tend to be much more of a narrow view versus the absolute breadth of what we get in shonen and seinen demographics. But with titles like this, with some of the titles that I mentioned already, and with some of the titles that have been announced for the upcoming year or so, it'll be really interesting. I hope we do see more josei, because I read a lot of it and I like a lot of it. And it's my demographic. It's my demographic. And speaking of licenses, today was the last day of Seven Seas' week of exciting licensing news. Lots of very, very big, surprising titles. Namely, of course, the Lupin the Third kind of best of collection, greatest heist or whatever it is, which I think will be fun. I mean, the Lupin manga is a classic, but I do think that a collation of best stories is probably the better way to read Lupin currently and contemporarily versus the entire run of the original series, where well, maybe not everyone, but hopefully you would find Lupin a pretty unlikable character. I mean, in his various iterations through anime adaptation and stuff like that, he's always been a bit of a lech and like a womanizer. But in the manga, he is like a straight up rapist a lot of times. So hopefully, Seven Seasons new release of that will avoid more stories focusing around that and focus more on the zany thefts that he and his crew get up to. And Lupin is exciting to see. I will probably be picking that book up, but more so, like, I was excited in other titles more than I was Lupin, because I do like Lupin, but I'm not like a diehard fan of the series, and I wasn't like chomping at the bit to get it relicensed, the manga at least. Going from the first day to the last, one light novel stood out to me, which was the one that was literally written for me, which was the Yokai Bookstore one. I don't remember its name specifically, but it is Yokai. It is a bookstore. That is all I need to know. And I'm pretty sure it's like shoujo or josei. I don't know. It's in my heart already, and I really look forward to that one. The next day was then they had Ghost Ship titles, which nothing like. I wasn't that into any of them. Nothing really stood out to me either, because the premise just didn't sound like something I'm interested in. Honestly, I'd be curious about the male porn star series. I'd buy that one probably digitally. It sounds like a fun time, but it's not a must-have. It wouldn't be a pre-order for me. And that's from their Ghost Ship imprint. So they're more raunchy titles, a little bit sexy, saucier titles. And then their actual Seven Seas licensing. I'm very excited for Seaside Stranger, Étranger de, whatever it is. Umebe no Étranger, which used to be digital only. That particular book, digital only from eRenta. I did read it many a year ago via them, and it I think the eRenta translation was all right. I don't really quite remember if it was super brilliant, but the manga itself is lovely, very, very wonderful. Even if you're not into BL, it's one that I highly recommend, just as a queer love story. It also has lesbian characters in it, just by the way. So it does a lot of really good things. It does a lot of things right. And hopefully with this print release, if it does do well, we will see the sequel, because there's an ongoing sequel being released right now in Japan, with 3 or 4 volumes out currently. Then after that, the Great Pretender manga was licensed, and that's fine. I mean, the show was all right. Choices were made in the last half. We'll put it that way. And I think most people who've seen the last 8 or 9 episodes know what I'm talking about. I liked parts of the last half. I thought some of it was very, very good. But then there's a lot of not very good stuff in there. And Great Pretender is it's a bit mix of like really great and then like that's pretty problematic. I don't know if I and it's not because the main characters are con men who like con skeezy billionaires. I don't care about billionaires losing their money. That's not the issue. It's more so hey, you're being basically gaslighted by these people that you trust, and or you were lied to by your parents for a long time, your entire life maybe, and now we're just expected to kiss and make up, right? And you're like, that's no. I do think they handled that disconnect of like, you're all terrible people and I hate you and you lied to me, and that was done well, but there's also choices were made, and so the Great Pretender manga, like I'm sure it's a great adaptation. I don't know, I don't know, but I probably won't be buying that one. What else did they license? So the other one that was kind of earlier on in the licensing that I was interested in was Mars Red. Is that what it's called? Yeah, the Taisho Vampire one. It's a vampire thriller Taisho series, or set in the Taisho period, which is early 20th century, if you are unaware. That is so much my thing. I was like, oh, thank you, give to me. I think it's also the mangaka. The one of the mangaka working on it is the creator of Laughing Under the Clouds, which recently got licensed by Tokyo Pop. Their other title as well. There's something else. I think DMP put out. Was it DMP? Countdown 7 Days. Who put that out? That was like 15 years ago at this point. I don't remember. But it's that mangaka, one of the creators working on it, because I do think it's a joint project, which means that the art will be lovely. And then obviously Kogeki Shoujo. So excited. So like that was the highlight. That and Seaside Stranger were like the two big ones for me. And I will absolutely be giving them my money. Like, obviously, it's just, of course I am. Yeah, that one's a day one purchase. I haven't even read the omnibus edition of the prequel / the first bit that we've gotten from Seven Seas yet, because I don't know if I've ordered it anywhere. I think I was waiting to see if the comic book store that I go to had it in stock before I order it online, and I haven't been there in like 2 weeks, so I do want to get it though. And I'm like, the sequel, I absolutely get it because I know that I'm gonna like this. It's not a question as to if I like it. I know I'll like it, but when I will get it to read it. And then the other thing that's pretty exciting to see is the Bloom Into You anthology. Bloom Into You is great. Love the series. Haven't finished it yet, but I do love it. And I'm wanting to watch the anime as well. Haven't gotten quite that far yet. But I think it's interesting that we're seeing anthologies more and more, especially in the Yuri space, but even anthologies that are like, what's the word for it? Obviously anthologies with multiple different creators, but set in the same world. And the thing that immediately comes to my mind are the Ancient Magus Bride anthology. Light novels is how they did those anthologies. I'm trying to think if there's something else. Can't remember. But recently we've seen more and more in the Yuri space with those syrup anthologies, and also like Eclair Bleu and Rouge and Blanc and whatever else, which I haven't read any of yet. I know Don't hold it against me. I will get there. But it's interesting. Obviously, I guess those are selling well for Seven Seas and other publishers. So the fact, and I'm sure that Bloom Into You sold very, very well for Seven Seas because it's great, but also the anime was popular. I'm sure that boosted sales. So there's an interest there. I can definitely see why they would do things that way. But yeah, it was a pretty fun time. Plenty of stuff I'm not personally that interested in. There's some stuff that I'm like, maybe I'll give it a read if, you know, I'm particularly curious, or if the library has it, or if there's a sale for certain series where the first volume is really cheap. I'll check it out. But those titles that I actually named were ones that I'm probably going to buy, and for some definitely going to buy, no matter what. So yeah, I mean, it's always interesting and exciting to have big licensing events like this, and we've seen more and more of that happen over the last year because of COVID and people not going to conventions and things like that. It's meant for me as an international fan that I'm getting announcements at similar, if not the same time as all of the fans who are in the US, and who in reality would be live tweeting it at a convention and getting it the news that way. But yeah, I hope that once COVID settles down and conventions seasons start to pick back up, and, you know, licensing events at conventions start happening again, that the company's media team does the PR on and live tweeting themselves on Twitter and Instagram, I guess, as well, versus relying on fans, because sometimes in the past the news coverage has been a little bit spotty for especially some of the lesser known titles, things that people aren't necessarily that excited about. So things can fall through the cracks. So if you can, like, just make a big thread of all of your exciting new titles, or post a blog post on it or something, then I think that's a bit more effective into getting excitement and buzz around all of the titles that you want people to be excited about. But yeah, I mean, that was my week. I read quite a variety of stuff, and I certainly had plenty to talk about. But I am very tired. I've had 4 hours of sleep, probably, and I have to wake up early again tomorrow. So I thank you guys so much for watching. No one in the live stream this week, which is fine. That's all right. We're all busy. It is a busy period of the year, for one, but you know, it's going to be up afterwards anyway, so I tend to expect that people watch it after the fact more so than live. So, you know, sometimes weeks are going to be like this. But thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video, whatever that'll be. Bye till then.